It was a horrific murder case that shocked the United States. And it's a case that proves that not everything on social media is what it seems. Hello everyone, my name is Anya, and in this video we're going to take a look at what happened on this day in the year 2018. The Watts family murders. On the 13th of August 2018, 34-year-old Shanann Watts and her two young daughters, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, reported missing from their family home in Colorado. Shanann, who was 15 weeks pregnant with her third child, had missed an important pregnancy checkup and was not responding to any text messages or phone calls. A close friend, Nicole Atkinson, asked for a welfare check on Shanann's home. An officer did a search outside the house but could find no trace of Shanann or her two little girls. Shortly after the officer arrived on the scene, Shanann's husband, 34-year-old Chris Watts, arrived home from work. He made the claim to Atkinson and the officer that Shanann had taken their two daughters off on a play date, but he couldn't provide them with any information about the play date and who Shanann was meeting. A search inside the house would uncover Shanann's phone, medications, and her wedding ring, items that she would normally never leave behind if she was leaving the house. The welfare officer noticed how evasive and uncaring Chris Watts seemed in relation to the disappearance of his family. He didn't really show any real concern regarding his wife and young daughter's well-being, and didn't seem quite responding to any of his questions. Chris and Shanann Watts have been married since 2012. Shanann worked for a marketing company known as Lavelle and promoted a product called Thrive, so her Facebook page was always busy. She was constantly promoting her products, posting photographs and videos of her family, and making statements that meeting Chris had changed her life for the better. From the outside looking in, it seemed that the Watts family had it all. A good house, nice jobs, 2 little children, another child on the way. From looking at Shanann's Facebook page, everything seemed perfect. But in the weeks prior to her disappearance, Shanann had expressed concerns to her friends that her marriage was falling apart. She noticed how her husband had become quite distant towards her and her daughters, and didn't show real excitement towards the fact that she was having another baby, even though that they were having their first son. She expressed concerns that he might be seeing somebody else and planned to leave her. As investigators would soon discover, Shanann was right. In the months prior to his wife's disappearance, Chris Watts had been having an affair with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger. He had made promises to Nicole that he had plans to leave his wife and start a new life with her. A promise that I'm sure many mistresses of married men have heard umpteen times before. Chris Watts was brought into a police station for questioning about the disappearance of his wife and daughters and his affair. He willingly took a lie detector test on what he knew about his wife and daughter's disappearance and failed miserably. Under pressure from officers and from his own father, Chris Watts ultimately confessed to the murder of his pregnant wife Shanann. He made the claim that he and Shanann had argued about the prospect of divorce, and he had strangled her after witnessing her smothering their two young daughters. He then gave officers the locations of where he had dumped his wife and their two little girls. Investigators discovered the lifeless body of Shanann Watts buried in a shallow grave on an oil field where Chris Watts worked as an operator. The bodies of their two young daughters, Bella and Celeste, were found dumped in nearby oil tanks. Chris Watts was arrested and charged with all 3 murders. Officers didn't believe for a second that Shanann Watts had anything to do with the deaths of her 2 young daughters. In November 2018, Chris Watts was charged with 5 counts of murder, 2 each for Bella and Celeste, as they were under the age of 12 at the time of their deaths. He was also charged with the unlawful termination of a pregnancy regarding his unborn son, who they had planned to name Nico. In order to escape the death penalty, Chris Watts pled guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole, meaning that he will serve the rest of his life behind bars. It wasn't until 2019 that Chris Watts finally confessed to not only the murder of his wife, but his 2 young daughters. He made the claim that he and Shanann had argued about his mistress and plans for divorce, and he had ultimately strangled her. Bella reportedly woke up and expressed concern about her mother. Chris Watts then took his wife and their 2 young daughters to the oil field where he worked. He then buried Shanann in a shallow grave before smothering his 2 young daughters and dumping their bodies in the oil tanks. This was a murder case that broke the hearts of a community. Those who didn't even know Shanann and her 2 young daughters expressed heartbreak over their murder. Many who viewed Shanann's Facebook page and the multiple posts she made in regard to her family couldn't understand how such a picture-perfect family could fall apart. This is a heartbreaking case that shows that married men, if you want to leave your wife, the best thing to do is get a divorce. You don't go and murder your entire family just for the sake of a mistress. It was a case that broke the hearts of America. And in a case that, in my opinion, shows that what you see on social media isn't always what it seems. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. My name is Anya, and we've just looked at what happened on this day.